There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. You're here tonight, with the night just beginning its slow drift. Your breath finds a gentle rhythm, your limbs rest heavy, and you begin to slip beneath the surface noise. Tonight, on the modern mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Carl Jung, dreams, symbols, and the quiet self, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt a whisper at the edge of sleep, a dream, a symbol, a question about who you are and why you came to be? Maybe there was a time when everything around you seemed to slip a little, a world so sure on the surface, but soft and mysterious just beneath. That's exactly what Carl Jung, dreams, symbols, and the quiet self once felt too. He did not begin as a revered thinker or an oracle in a distant library. He began as a child, a little boy, searching for a place to put his longings, his questions, and his fears. There was a restlessness in him, a gentle ache, a quiet curiosity to feel something real, something steady in the swirling world. And maybe you felt that too. Tonight, we walk together through the story of a soul like yours, one whose questions outnumbered his answers, whose childhood was lined with shadows and light, whose life became one long quest to understand the language of dreams and the quiet voice within. You don't have to know all the details or remember every word. Just let the sound carry you. Let your breathing slow, your shoulders soften. This is the story of someone who lived in the soft spaces, whose genius was not noise or drama, but stillness, like a perfectly smooth lake at dusk. Tonight you enter that stillness, and perhaps find a part of yourself there. If you've ever lain awake and wondered about your purpose, about the meaning in symbols and dreams, or if you've simply longed for a kinder way to meet yourself each day, this journey is for you. There's no hurry. The story unfolds like breath, one gentle inhale, one gentle exhale, as you step gently into the quiet world of Carl Jung, the world where symbols live and shadows speak, the world that is also quietly, bravely your own. It starts here, in the dark, with only your breath and a voice to walk beside you. Let's begin, not to learn, but to remember. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight, on the modern mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Carl Jung, dreams, symbols, and the quiet self, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. So just breathe for me. Let the soft rhythm of your chest remind you this is a journey, not a lesson. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, his story may become your own. Maybe you've wondered if your dreams mattered, if the strange images behind your eyes at night whispered a secret just for you. Have you ever felt a pull toward something you can't name? That quiet ache, like a sigh you haven't taken yet? Maybe there was a time when you searched for meaning, feeling lost in a sea of people and expectation. That's exactly what Carl Jung dreams, symbols, and the quiet self once felt too. He wasn't born with answers. He was born with questions that lingered like shadows on the edge of light. Growing up, the world did not hand him a map. Instead, he learned to listen to the subtle instructions of his own silence, to trust that the unseen, the forgotten, the invisible held a door to something wide and deep. Close your eyes now, or at least let your gaze soften. You don't have to chase a single thought. Just sink into this story, into Carl's life, as if it's a warm current carrying you along. Nothing will be demanded of you here. There is only the invitation to remember that you are not alone in wanting more than what you can see, that a gentle, quiet presence can change the course of a life, that the answers aren't outside you, but beneath your own conscious waves. Carl's journey will show us a way of being that trusts in the night, listens to the heart, and follows the dance of dreams. He stumbled, he wondered, he doubted, just as you may in your most honest moments. You are invited to drift with me through the spaces that shaped him, through the longing, the struggle, the wisdom that grew like soft moss in hidden places. This story won't ask you to be anything but present. If you lose the words, just float on the voice. If your mind wanders, that's okay. Every breath brings you home. You are not here to learn. You are here to remember what it means to be in quiet communion with your own soul. Let's begin together. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Carl Jung, dreams, symbols, and the quiet self, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt like you were searching for something just beyond your reach? Maybe there was a time when silence felt louder than any voice around you, or a moment alone under the gaze of the moon when it seemed like the world was full of riddles only you could see. That's exactly what Carl Jung dreams, symbols, and the quiet self once felt too. He saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be. Even as a child, small and half hidden in his own dreams, Carl wondered why certain things tugged at his heart. There was the stillness of the woods behind his parents' house, the weight of afternoon sunlight on old stone, the way a stranger's eyes could reveal loneliness and hope at the same time. He was born in Switzerland, a land of quiet hills and ancient lakes, where the days stretched out with a hush that invited you inward. Carl's father was a pastor, a man who walked with solemnity, yet whose voice faded into absence when big questions arose. His mother, wise and private, carried her own shadow, a sense of the unknown that seemed to flow in and out of rooms like cool, pale mist. Early on, Carl felt different. Not in the bravado way other boys felt special, but in the soft, lonely way of someone whose mind runs deeper than their own words can reach. In crowded rooms, he noticed meaning flickering between looks and gestures. In quiet moments, he'd lie in bed and drift into a landscape all his own, one built of symbols, whispers, memories that belonged and yet somehow didn't. There were days when the world felt too heavy. People spoke about God and meaning in ways that seemed simple, but for Carl, the world was never simple. It was alive, layered, full of unseen forces that shaped every joy and every sorrow. He couldn't explain it, not to his father with his sermons, and not to his classmates who prized certainty and answers. So he carried his questions in secret until those questions became the inner thread that would shape everything else. If you are awake here tonight, tuning into the modern mystic not for facts, but for something softer, something that calls forward your own inner journey, you're not alone. Maybe you too have felt the pull of the inner world, the strange comfort of unanswered questions, the way a dream can linger long after the sun has risen. Tonight, as you listen, let your own breath slow. Imagine Carl not as a portrait in a museum, but as a living invitation, a guide beside you, pausing with you at the edge of a deeper self. Stay with this quiet. Let the story unfold like a page turned not by hands, but by breath. This is where Carl's journey begins, and maybe, in some way, where yours returns. There are stories that change your mind, and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Right now, you get to lie back, let your eyes soften, let your breath loosen just a bit. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Carl Jung, dreams, symbols, and the quiet self, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. Not just a name in a textbook or a photograph in an old book, but a presence, a pulse, a gentle calling that might match the one you felt in your own moments of unanswered wonder. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. If there's ever been a night where you wished your dreams would show you who you are, or a day you wondered if there was a quiet guide beneath all the noise, just know that is not just your longing. That's the universal ache for belonging, clarity, release. Have you ever felt the world spinning a bit too fast? That silent reach inside, like you're meant to remember something you've never quite been told. Maybe there was a time when you lay awake, wanting to believe there is more to your thoughts, more to the symbols that circle through your head as you fall asleep. Maybe you've crossed the edge of sleep, and in that thin place, felt the presence of your own quiet self growing larger, more curious, tender. That's exactly what Carl Jung, dreams, symbols, and the quiet self, once felt too. So for the next while, let all your roles fall away, the to-dos, the shoulds, the swirling identities. Let's walk together into the night air, where stories breathe you back and where the life of Carl Jung is less a list of events, more a mirror held up to your soul. This is not biography as you know it. It's more like gently opening a door to a life that explored the dream world, made symbols into guides, and found in stillness the power to become fully, quietly oneself. Through the spaces in his story, you might feel your own story rise up. Through his struggles, your own permission to rest. Through his quiet mastery, the possibility of meeting the bigger, wiser you. I'll stay with you in the soft dark, one voice, one presence, sometimes whispering his life, sometimes inviting you to remember your own. So let's settle in, just you, a slow breath, and the gentle invitation of Carl Jung's living soul story. As we walk through the night together, you might find you don't really fall asleep to this story, you fall open. In a small, quiet town by the water, a boy was born, not into greatness, not even into comfort, but into questions. This child who would become Carl Jung entered the world in Switzerland, where the mountains stood ancient and still, and the water moved beneath them with silent memory. The air was cleaner than most places. Growing up, Jung could almost taste the hidden meanings in it. He watched the play of clouds and listened more than he spoke to the currents of the world around him. His father was a pastor, full of sermons that promised answers. His mother, mysterious, moved through moods like weather. Their home was one part study, one part sanctuary, one part storm. Carl watched people come and go, believers, doubters, seekers. He learned that every adult wore a mask, and that nobody truly knew for sure what face to show when the lights went out. He'd see his father's faith flicker, hear confessions whispered through walls, catch glimpses of the longing behind even the strongest voices. He was mostly alone, not lonely, just apart. He gathered questions like river stones. Why do people do what they do? Where do dreams come from? How can someone seem so certain by daylight, then so fragile at night? While other kids played games, Carl walked the edges, along the shore, through the woods, under the long stretch of sky, sometimes feeling like he was being watched by something older than the trees. He often stared into water, searching for another world under the surface, seeing not just his reflection, but the living questions behind it. There were moments when he felt pulled between opposite worlds. His father's religious certainty, his mother's mystical unknown. Two currents, a push and a pull. Jung learned early that life was never just one thing. There was the outside and deep inside, a realm without words, where feelings and images gathered and shifted just out of reach. Even as a child, he sensed these layers. He could feel pain move beneath laughter, feel hope flicker behind disappointment. In school, Jung was quiet, a shadow in the room, the one who noticed what wasn't said. Teachers mistook his silence for slowness. Classmates sometimes mocked him, but he watched them too. Everyone was trying to belong, each inventing their own kind of mask. When evening came, Jung's favorite time unfolded. When his mother's singing drifted like a lullaby, when lamps cast golden rings on the floor, when each sound echoed a little longer. In that hush, his mind wandered. He wondered why he dreamed what he dreamed, why one moment he was flying above the steeple, next tumbling down into darkness. Nothing in church or school explained it. It was as if a secret book was written just for him, and only night would lift its cover. If you've ever listened to rain tapping against glass, felt the ache of wanting to understand your story, you know something of this longing. Jung's childhood was spent with one foot in this world, one in the other, not the world of spirits, but of possibilities, where quiet was both gift and challenge. He grew older, but never really outgrew the silent questions. They followed him into every room, folding into every breath. They shaped the spaces between him and others, teaching him that everyone, no matter how sure they sounded, was carrying a cathedral of questions inside. Even then, in the sleepy heart of Switzerland, the seeds of something larger were being planted inside Carl Jung, not the seeds of answers, but of listening. Even before he had the words, he learned how to sense what was hidden in others, how pain tucked itself beneath laughter, how fear disguised itself as anger. He didn't know it yet, but he was being prepared to see the world through a new set of eyes, the eyes that would one day glimpse symbols in dreams, see the soul hidden behind every story, find quiet purpose in the mystery itself. Let's follow that soft current forward into the spark that would change him forever. It happened quietly, like most sparks do. There was no thunder, no bright eruption. It began with a question, a chill, a sudden shift in the air. Young Carl had just begun his deeper study, surrounded by thick books and even thicker silences. At night, walking alone by the river, moonlight painted strange shapes on the water. Sometimes, if he waited long enough, the mist would part and he'd feel, not see, not exactly hear, but feel, an answer waiting. One night, barely older than a teenager, Carl had a dream. He was deep underground in a stone cellar he'd never seen before. The walls were cold with age. Above him he could hear footsteps, muffled voices, but he was alone in the dark, holding nothing but the question, "Why am I here?" As he reached out, the stone walls began to crumble, revealing a spiral stair that led only downward. He hesitated, then breathed in. Each step was heavy but necessary. The deeper he went, the warmer the air felt, the more familiar the darkness became. It was terrifying but true, like returning to a place he'd only known in glimpses. At the lowest level he found an ancient fire, guarded by figures he half recognized, their faces a blend of stranger and self. They didn't speak, only nodded and pointed to the flame. When he woke, the world felt different, not just his room, but the world itself. For days afterward, reality wavered at the edges. He realized his dreams held messages bigger than any lesson from the pulpit or schoolbook. They weren't nonsense. They were maps drawn by something older and wiser inside him. That was his first true ignition. Not just having a dream, but understanding it was a language, and he was already fluent somewhere deep in his bones. The spark wasn't a single moment, but the easing open of a door inside. Walking through that door meant admitting he could no longer just live on the surface. He wanted to know where dreams came from, why symbols chased his waking hours, how the unconscious could shape the shape of his life. From then on, no hour was just an hour. His mind became a territory, his life a field of hidden patterns. He began to study medicine, assuming it would lead to solid answers. But always in quiet moments, he slipped back into that secret stairwell, descending, grateful, afraid. sharing this space with him now. Maybe you remember a moment when your own dream jolted you awake and left you changed. Maybe there was a time one small insight made the whole world look new. The first spark doesn't have to be loud. Most often, it begins gentle, strange, almost silent. What matters is following it without fear. Carl began to read everything he could about the mind, the soul, the ancient worlds of myth and magic. He copied pages by candlelight, hungry for any clue that would explain the shape of his strange inner world. Conversations with his father grew tense. His father wanted certainty. Carl needed mystery. At times, it was a lonely kind of hunger. But now he knew, somewhere down spiraling stairs, there would always be a flame waiting for him. Real mastery, the kind that touches the soul, doesn't come in bright moments of joy. It unfolds through struggle. Carl Jung's life was marked not by triumph, but by a sacred struggle that asked everything of him. He chose to become a psychiatrist at a time when people understood little about the mind and cared less. Patients were locked away, treated like unsolvable problems. The world wanted fast fixes, easy categories. But Carl saw each patient as a whole world. Each story was a living, breathing dream. Every quirk, symptom, and secret was a message trying to be understood. But this was not popular. Inside the hospital walls, his ways made him an outsider. Even as a young doctor, they called him odd, too gentle, too curious about shadows. His struggle deepened when he met Sigmund Freud, a meeting that would shape his entire soul's journey. At first, Freud was mentor, friend, almost father. They talked for hours, days, about the mind's mysterious layers. Carl found someone who saw the hidden lines connecting dream and waking life. Together, they dared to believe that every human carried a shadow, the holy, frightening possibility of what we don't yet understand about ourselves. But nothing stays certain. As Carl's ideas grew, he began to see limits. Freud insisted on answers, clung to a single lens. Carl wanted to stretch the boundaries, to open the windows wider. They argued, gently at first, then with deep hurt. The world watched as their partnership soured into silence. That struggle, the ache of losing a friend, a guide, a piece of himself, nearly broke him. He spent long seasons wandering those inner corridors, unsure if he'd been foolish to push beyond what was safe. Have you ever felt that yourself? The pain of growing beyond your old world, the grief of letting go. For Jung, it wasn't just loss. It was exile from the only home he'd known in his work. The medical community doubted him. Old friends turned away. He spent nights at his desk, wrestling with the shadows, afraid there might never be a place for his kind of wonder. Yet underneath the struggle, he sensed a hidden pattern. Just as in dreams, the dark must be crossed before the light. He scribbled ideas in secret, worried his work would be forgotten. He walked alone by the lake, listening for direction in the ripple of water. Each day felt both sacred and impossible. The world didn't understand what he was trying to find. Sometimes he didn't understand it either. But something, The same quiet self he'd met in childhood held him steady. He learned to let go of certainty, to breathe through confusion. In the struggle, he met the most honest parts of himself. The longing, the grief, the hope, they hurt, but they were real. And real is always holy. Jung's sacred struggle was never about winning. It was about staying faithful to the questions, letting struggle teach him to recognize his own soul's music, even when no one else could hear it. Sometimes, in silence, a shift happens that can never be undone. Carl Jung's turning point was not a single event, but a slow, necessary awakening. During the years of exile from his old teacher, after the bridges had burned, he stepped away from everything he had known. He left the certainty of the hospital, the patterns of his old friendships. Instead, he moved to the shores of Lake Zurich, to a house he built almost from scratch. There, alone with the water and the shifting sky, he gave himself permission to wander. He let dreams lead him every morning. He wrote down images, let symbols trickle through his fingers onto paper. Some days he painted, carving out shapes that made no sense to anyone else. At night, he built stone towers with his own hands, a strange ritual that settled the ache inside him. Each stone stacked was a small act of belonging. He was building not just a home, but an inner foundation. The real shift was inside. He realized he could not become truly himself by reflecting another's ideas, not even Freud's. He had to stand in his solitude, listen for a new kind of silence. That was the turning. He found that being misunderstood was not a curse but a calling. That wandering was not getting lost, but learning the shape of his own depth. In dreams, the same themes kept returning: the spiral stair, the hidden flame, the ancient guides. He wrote them down, not for others to read, but for himself, as if every symbol was a breadcrumb back to the meaning he was searching for. Slowly, people began to notice, not the loud ones, but those who sensed there was more to life. They came from near and far, hoping that Jung could give them a new way of seeing their own struggles. He welcomed them quietly, never as a guru, always as a companion. His turning point was learning that the path is not about being right, it's about being real, about letting go of belonging everywhere and instead belonging deeply to yourself. You may have felt your own turning, even if you never named it. That moment you chose your quiet truth over someone else's expectation. That's the crossroads Jung walked for years, a path less known, but deeply his own. After the turning, life became slower, but infinitely more true. Jung did not race toward answers anymore. He settled into a rhythm that looked like stillness, but was alive with currents beneath the surface. He lived by the lake, walking the same forest paths each morning, barefoot sometimes, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath his feet. The rhythm of his breath matched wind through trees. He saw fewer patients, but listened more deeply. Each session became a quiet ceremony. He let dreams guide the inquiry, let symbols do their work. He was no longer searching outside for validation. Every action, writing, painting, building, became an extension of his inner world. The movements of his day, a sip of tea, a stack of rocks, a walk at dusk, became his new form of prayer. He loved the world's ordinary things: old books, smooth stones, warm light on wooden floors. He watched how the seasons changed the shapes of leaves, how clouds reshaped the mountains. He collected stories from those who trusted him, not as a scientist collecting data, but as one gathering seeds for planting out beyond his own life. He moved with patience, slow, grounded, always returning to the quiet place inside. Jung called this place the self, but to him it was simply home. He saw every person as a story unfolding, every pain as an invitation to become more whole. He never promised magic, never replaced struggle with easy comfort, but everyone who sat with him felt the truth in his presence. Here you could be unfinished. Here your story was still welcome. In living his truth, he learned how to let go of the noise. He kept what made him come alive, left the rest behind. He lived outside the chase for prestige. He let nature teach him to trust the cycles, the ebb and flow, the falling away and the returning light. In this way, Jung quietly became a master of wholeness, simply by choosing to stand in himself every day, breath by patient breath. There's a kind of mastery that arrives quietly, a soft power that comes not from having the answers, but from knowing how to listen for them. For Jung, this mastery was the art of tending to the inner world. He became, in many ways, a gardener of the psyche, learning when to plant, when to prune, when to simply let things be. One day, a patient arrived haunted by recurring nightmares, images they believed meant madness. Jung listened with his whole being, noticing the subtle changes of breath, the shiver in the voice. He never rushed. Instead, he invited the story to breathe through the room. Together, they named the symbols as they appeared: a door that wouldn't open, a shadow in the corner, a river that must be crossed. Every image was welcomed, no part rejected. In these quiet sessions, Carl did not direct. He accompanied. He taught through the way he witnessed. He let each moment find its own meaning, trusting that the soul sends the right dream at the right time. It was not technique, but presence, a way of being that allowed each person to feel seen, not cured, but reclaimed. His own dreams kept teaching him, too. Sometimes they woke him in the night, delivering a revelation or a warning. He wrote them down, surrendered to their rhythm. From these pages, whole new insights would grow about the shadow, the anima and animus, the collective memory we all carry. But his mastery was not the theories he wrote. Those came later. His mastery was the quiet discipline of staying, always with what is real inside, even when no one is looking. He learned to wait out storms. He accepted that sometimes the wisest thing was not to change a feeling, but to let it speak. He grew patient with what hurt, patient with what surprised him. This patience became his gift to himself and to all who later read his work or rested in his presence. Maybe you felt it too on certain nights. The readiness to sit quietly with your own dreams, to let the strange symbols stay a little longer, to inquire kindly, "What are you trying to show me?" This is the mastery Jung lived, not in brilliance or bravado, but in the brave, gentle practice of staying with the truth of what is unfolding within. Even now, many years later, the hidden laws Jung lived by are still only partly understood. He never wrote them out, never codified them for others. But if you look at the shape of his days, you can sense the spiritual code he inhabited. He moved in rhythm, not with the world's demands, but with the deeper pulse of life. He trusted the language of dreams, letting non-logic guide him when reason could not. He treated symbols not as problems to solve, but as friends to greet. His work was less about teaching, more about remembering, a gentle return to what so many of us once knew as children, that the world is alive with meaning, and every ordinary thing holds a secret shimmer just beneath the surface. Jung honored the shadow, believing that what we fear to look at in ourselves is just as holy as what we delight in. He accepted that pain often signals an invitation, that confusion is not failure, but an initiation into greater wholeness. He moved through the world with quiet faith, the kind that trusts each step will reveal itself only after you've taken it. He lived spaciously, leaving room for others to breathe, never forcing his own vision. His greatest work was never about making people follow him, but in helping them discover their own inner teachers. He lived by the gentle law of waiting, the quiet law of presence. Within each of us, these same hidden codes can wake up. A willingness to trust what we can't explain, a kindness for our unclaimed grief, a slow return to what is most alive inside. In this, Jung is not a myth. We all live by these invisible laws, if only we remember to listen. If you could ask Carl Jung's soul what it would whisper now, through all the pages and the years, past all the books and whispered conversations in dark rooms, maybe it would gently offer you these reflections, that every dream is both a riddle and a comfort, that even your strangest visions are trying to return you to yourself, that you are never lost, only in the process of becoming whole. That pain is not a punishment, but a portal, an opportunity to befriend your shadow, to discover light in the places you've feared most, that you don't have to have all the answers. In fact, wholeness comes from learning to live inside the questions a little longer than feels comfortable. He might remind you that the symbols that echo through your days, the feather on the sidewalk, the song at the right moment, the recurring image in your mind, are invitations to let life speak to you in its own quiet language. You are not required to decode everything. Presence is more important than certainty. Maybe, most of all, he would offer this. It is safe to become your true self, even if that means being misunderstood by the world. Belonging to your own soul is the deepest form of belonging, and in that belonging, you create space for others to do the same. Let all of this drift with you now, not as answers, but as gentle signatures, traces that remind you the journey inward is the bravest journey of all. And now we've arrived at the threshold, the place where story falls away and presence remains. You may feel a new softness between breaths, the echo of Jung's journey alive in your own. In this final space, there's nothing left to do, only to be. As you linger in the quiet, feel the mantra of Carl Jung's path pulse through your own body, like a secret drumbeat only you can hear. I remember the stillness. I walk with quiet light. My soul is in rhythm here. Let these words land quietly. You might repeat them on a breath or in your mind's own voice. I remember the stillness. I walk with quiet light. My soul is in rhythm here. Even as sleep arrives, know that something wakes inside you. In the hush beyond these words, you walk the same road Jung once walked, the path to your own quiet brilliance. You are allowed to pause, allowed to rest, allowed to belong. The story does not end. It continues inside you, breath after breath, dream after dream. All you need is already here. I remember the stillness. I walk with quiet light. My soul is in rhythm here. This is also your path. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Carl Jung dreams, symbols, and the quiet self, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt an ache you couldn't explain? Maybe there was a time when you woke from a dream, the edges fading, but the feeling lingering, like a secret you almost remembered. Have you ever looked for meaning in a symbol, a feather on a path, a recurring number, an old photograph that showed up just when you needed it? Have you stood at the edge of your own mind and wondered what more was waiting for you in the layers beneath? That's exactly what Carl Jung once felt too. Let yourself settle as you listen. There's no need to stay alert, just let your body rest. Let each word be a gentle presence at your side. This is not a lecture. It's not a lesson you need to memorize. It's a journey, slow, curious, and safe, into a life that shaped the way we dream and the way we wake. Carl Jung will become more than a name. Tonight, as your day ends and the world softens, you'll find his tale opening something in you. Just beneath thought, we begin, not in the noise of history, but in the hush from which every soul first rises. We begin with longing, the quiet call that asks, who am I truly beneath it all? All the rest, just breathe with me. Let's find the door together. He was a child with questions bigger than the room, a boy who found silence heavier than sound, and wondered if dreams were more real than anything he touched. Before anyone called him Carl Jung, before there were titles or books, theories or fame, there was just a kid, looking through a window at the rain, feeling something ancient moving in his chest. Sometimes he felt like he was standing apart, looking in. Sometimes he was certain that other people moved through life as if they belonged, while he waited for something unnamed to arrive. Have you ever been there? Watching, breathing, holding the pieces of yourself until the right moment to let them fall into place. Karl was born in Switzerland, in a village small enough that the seasons had their own voice. His father was a pastor, sometimes distant, sometimes soft. His mother, a quiet force, carried her own mysteries. Jung felt the weight of their silence, the sadness adults try to hide, the questions they leave unasked. He noticed how people avoided their own depths. Even as a child, he listened for the pauses in conversation, the meaning tucked in a sigh or a stare out the window. Some nights he would lie awake, feeling the world pressing in on all sides. He worried about death, about what waited on the other side of closed eyes. But even then he dreamed vividly, and the dreams stayed with him, filled with strange symbols, impossible lands, speaking a language he almost understood. As he grew, school became a dance he didn't know the steps to. Other children seemed loud, sure, whole. He learned to wear masks, the good son, the careful student, the silent observer. But inside, he was swirling with images and questions. He studied rocks, insects, maps, looking for patterns, for proof that chaos could be ordered. Teachers called him sensitive. His father wondered if he was ill. Carl just drifted, waiting always for the signal that it was safe to be fully awake. He found corners to hide in. There he would watch sunlight changing the color of the table or the way dust floated in the late afternoon. These small details nobody else seemed to notice, but to Carl they were everything. They were signs that the world had layers, outer, visible ones, and silent depths underneath. He began to suspect that everyone wore masks, that nobody was quite what they showed. Every now and then the ache would return, sudden and strong. An emptiness or a thin sadness, sometimes for no reason at all. He wondered if he was alone in this, if other people moved through life with the same secret. He rarely asked, but he watched, always building a quiet vocabulary of what it means to be human. Longing, uncertainty, wonder. These became the seeds of his future work, though at the time he had no words for what waited inside him. Only the question remained, an undercurrent in every childhood day. Who am I in this silence? In those early years, before he was famous, before anyone looked to him for wisdom, Carl found a strange comfort in the uncertainty. He started to believe that somewhere beyond the noise of life lay a field of meaning that everyone could return to. Maybe dreams were not just images, but messages. Maybe silence was not emptiness, but a waiting space, an invitation to listen deeper. If you've ever sat with longing, feeling different, hoping for something only you could see, if you've ever wondered whether your own questions have meaning, breathe easy tonight. You're not the only one. Carl Jung walked that path ahead of you, and his footprints are quiet, steady, waiting for you now. Just let go. The story is just starting. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Carl Jung dreams, symbols, and the quiet self, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, his story may become your own. Have you ever felt a restlessness right below your ribs, like a hummingbird's wing, moving just under the surface? Maybe there was a time when you stood at your window at night and asked the sky a question you couldn't bring words to. That's exactly what Carl Jung once felt too, in the echoing dark of his childhood home in Switzerland. I want to begin not with dates and places, but with that echo you feel right now, the one between your breaths, behind your thoughts. Jung's world began in stories, a world half silence, half mystery. There was a church with heavy bells and a garden where secrets tangled with the weeds. There was a quiet boy who learned that dreams sometimes knew him better than his own waking name. In the hush before sleep, you might sense that same threshold. The quiet you're entering now is the threshold Jung always saw. Maybe, just maybe, you'll feel how his lifelong search was never really for answers, but for a deeper question worth living inside. Tonight, as you close your eyes and let the world drift just a bit farther away, this story moves with you. In every chapter, you might find yourself in Jung's lonely walks along the woods, in his lifelong awkwardness around crowds, and in how he carried a kind of invisible lantern, searching always for a light that didn't blind him, but allowed him to see within. If your heart aches for belonging, stay with me. If you've ever been haunted by a symbol in a dream, or felt like there's a code to your life that no one else can read, know you're not alone. Jung lived here too, in the place where logic gives way to feeling, and feeling gently unfolds to meaning. So tonight, let's walk quietly by his side. You won't need to remember facts or believe in anything. Your only job is to let yourself drift and let the story sink in. If the mind wanders, let it wander. The story will hold you gently until you're ready to sleep. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Carl Jung dreams, symbols, and the quiet self, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt like there was an entire world living quietly underneath your thoughts, like a gentle current that pulls just beneath everyday life? Maybe there was a time when you asked yourself, what's really true for me? What is the meaning behind all these little moments, the strange scenes from dreams, those symbols that stick with you like a feeling you can't shake? That's exactly what Carl Jung dreams, symbols, and the quiet self once felt too. Tonight, as you lay down and welcome the hush of this space, I want you to know you're not alone. We're here together, breathing gently in the darkness, tracing the quiet roads of a soul who walked ahead. Carl Jung's story isn't just about a lifetime. It's about the slow unwinding of questions that almost every heart whispers when the world gets quiet. You see, Jung was a seeker of the unseen, someone who noticed the patterns that dance just outside of what we name, who wondered at the mysteries tucked away in the edges of dream. If you've ever had a dream that felt more real than real, or a moment where time slowed and something deep inside said, pay attention, this journey is for you. In this space, you don't have to figure it all out. There's no rush to understand, just the gentle invitation to listen, feel, and remember that your own story is already sacred, simply because you are here. So, as your breath settles, and the world fades just a little bit more, let's begin. There are stories that change your mind, and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Carl Jung, dreams, symbols, and the quiet self, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt that silent ache just behind your thoughts? Maybe there was a night when you tried to fall asleep and something kept surfacing, a dream, a feeling, a question that wouldn't let go. Maybe you found yourself pausing in the middle of the day, lost in the feeling that something more is waiting beneath the surface. That's exactly what Carl Jung, dreams, symbols, and the quiet self once felt too. Let me invite you to imagine a different kind of understanding, not with facts or dates, but with the breath that moves through your own body right now. Picture this. A child sits alone, watching shadows dance on the wall. He wonders what it means to dream about water, why some symbols keep coming back, gentle but insistent. He wonders, are these shadows just shapes, or are they messengers from some deeper well? Feel what that longing does inside you. The part of you that is awake, even in sleep. There's a reason some people search all their lives for meaning, because the world outside can't quiet the world inside. Maybe you know that feeling when something whispers, there is more. Carl did. The silence grew with him, not as loneliness, but as a companion. Dreams visited like soft visitors in the night. In every memory, every symbol, there was a lesson and a presence. Tonight, if you listen softly, that presence might settle into you, too. Maybe tonight is about you, about letting someone else's journey become the mirror for your own. Can you let go and rest? Can you allow the story of Carl Jung to loosen what's tight in your heart so you can drift into the embrace of dreams? As your breath slows, as the night deepens, you are exactly where you need to be. This story isn't just about Carl Jung. It's about the ancient pulse inside you, quietly remembering its way home. So settle in. Let this story unwrap its meaning, one breath at a time. There's no urgency here, just the rhythm of your own being, sinking deeper with every pause. You are not alone with your dreams or confusion. Carl wasn't either. He wandered, he questioned, he made peace with his shadows and his light. If you have ever felt like you are searching, even without knowing for what, tonight is for you. Let's begin. There are stories that change your mind, and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Carl Jung, dreams, symbols, and the quiet self, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Maybe you've found yourself lying awake, wondering if there is more, quietly searching for the shape of your own soul, or feeling the weight of a day you can't quite explain. Maybe you've sensed a gentle nudge, a longing to see deeper than what's right in front of you. Have you ever felt a strange mix of comfort and restlessness right before sleep slips in? That's exactly what Carl Jung dreams, symbols, and the quiet self once felt too. It's a pull, small and persistent, that asks you to look beneath the surface. You're invited to settle in just as you are, letting the outside noise fall away. Picture yourself laying down, feeling the gentle rise and fall of your breath as the world gets softer around the edges. This space is for you, nobody to impress, nothing to fix, only the chance to be and to remember. Jung wasn't always this name you've seen in books or heard on podcasts. He began as a child, quietly watching everything. He lived with questions, the same kind you might hold. Who am I? Why do I dream? And what is this quiet ache that asks for something more? As you listen, let yourself remember moments when you noticed something in yourself, a shadow you didn't understand, an image that stuck with you for no reason, a longing that curled up in your stomach. These aren't just passing feelings. They're doors opening quietly to parts of yourself you might not have met yet. Tonight, we follow Jung, not to learn facts, but to trace the light his presence left behind. You don't have to know psychology or the symbols he loved. You only need to listen softly and maybe hear a word or two that feels like it belongs to your story too. So let your breath slow, let your thoughts become clouds, drifting by, easy and free. This is just for you, a gentle journey, soul to soul, walking in the footsteps of a man whose deepest discoveries were really about all of us. If you've searched for stillness, for meaning in the mess of the mind, or just wanted to know that you're okay as you are, it's enough. You're right on time. Let's begin together. Carl Jung was born in a small Swiss village where the mountains seemed to breathe just above the roofs. His world was quiet and green, filled with the rhythm of seasons and the secret music of old churches. From the earliest days, Jung felt different, as if there were more to life than what people said. He watched everything, the way sunlight slid through his window each morning, how snow fell in absolute silence, how his parents moved around the kitchen, not always saying what was really on their minds. There were moments when he would wander down narrow dirt paths, his feet pressing soft grass, lost in dreams that weren't entirely his. He noticed the hush between trees, a quiet that almost spoke. Sometimes that quiet made him feel safe. Other times it made him feel like he was alone with everything. Jung's father was a pastor, a good man, gentle but weighed down, as if he was always carrying a secret burden. His mother was different, warm sometimes, and then distant, living in a world of her own. As a boy, Jung wondered what was real, the words adults spoke, or the shadows behind their eyes. He learned to watch for small things, a broken clock, a bird's sudden flight, the way his mother stared out a window for hours. At night, Jung would lie in bed listening to the rhythm of his own breath, asking questions he didn't have words for. Maybe you remember doing that too, staring at your ceiling, wishing you understood why you felt so much, or why dreams sometimes felt louder than your daytime life. Jung carried his longing like a lantern, even when it was heavy, or when nobody else seemed to notice that anything was missing. There were hard days, memories of feeling left out at school, of grown-ups dismissing his feelings, brushing away his fears with a quick pat on the head. The pain of not fitting in, of holding big questions inside a small body, taught him about silence. Not the silence of peace, but of waiting, of holding breath, hoping someone would understand him, or at least see that he was trying to understand himself. He grew up in a house full of books, old ones, dusty and mysterious. Pages about ancient myths, strange people, faded prayers. Sometimes, late at night, he'd steal one down from the shelves, tracing his fingers along the words, feeling like maybe the people in those stories were speaking to him across time. He watched his father pray, watched his mother drift into moods she couldn't explain. Sometimes he even worried that he would become invisible, just another person going through the motions, missing the deeper rhythm underneath. But beneath all of that was a longing, a spark that told him that life could be more than this. If he just kept watching and dreaming, the mountains watched over him, standing steady year after year, as he learned to listen to the world in a different way. If you've ever felt small in a big world, or wondered where you fit, you've already walked in Jung's footprints. He learned early that some feelings can't be named. Some questions don't have answers, not right away. And that's okay. Holding the questions, living with the wonder, was enough to begin. There are stories that change your mind, and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Maybe